Good morning, YouTube. It's Josh, FJ55 Iron Pig. As always, thank you so much for clicking on that video. If the camera gets bumped a couple times, that's more than likely the puppy dog. That is, well, here, I'll just show you. She's right here next to me. Yeah, I'm rocking the sandals today. Even got a creeper around the corner there. Alright, so, as you can tell by the title, this is part 2, or shelf 2, of what I have on my shelves as far as books are concerned. So without further ado, let's just dig right into it. We'll start right here. Now, some of these books, I don't remember, in the first one did I... Yeah, some of these books are from, that I purchased while I was overseas. Just a couple of them. Like this one, All of Ancient Rome. I picked that up in Rome. Rome was actually a really cool place. I highly recommend going to Italy for anybody. The history there is so rich. And the architecture is really cool too. If you're not a fan of architecture, when you go there, you will be when you leave. It's just amazing. Like Colosseum, so cool. Just off the Colosseum, I mean, everything looks very similar. Of course, it's more modernized now, but all the buildings are old buildings. I mean, Italy is just awesome. Gotta check it out. This basically shows what it was like back then, and they got some artist pictorials compared to what it looks like now. And it's a basic book. It's pretty cool though. This book is called The Gunfighters. Oop, upside down. There we go. The Gunfighters. It's a Time Life series, and this is an old one. I think this is from the 80s, if I remember correctly. This one's really cool. Even if you're not a firearms dude, it's awesome. It shows the actual firearms of some of these dudes. Their pictures, they got their death pictures. It's got their brief stories of each person in here. And it's really cool. Like, here you go. Here's some death pictures. Like, that dude got shot in the face. Ouch. So, yeah. Definitely check that book out. It's really good. Here's something cheesy. Oh, yeah. You want to check this one out? Thanks. No. We don't go in front of the camera. Come here. Come over here. She's feeling a little left out. A little jealous. 550 tattoo ideas. It's mostly 1990s tribal. And there's some flash from that era as well. That's when I bought it. There's another one I bought at a open air market in Italy. Actually got a tattoo while I was in Italy, in Ancona, Italy, by Tommaso Buglioni. Tommaso Buglioni has done tattoos for a lot of famous people. And a lot of musicians as well. Here's one of my favorite books. I don't know if any of you guys, if you have children, if you have grandchildren, and you still have actual real pictures, I would highly recommend making one of these. Maybe for when those little bastards move out. That's when I got this one, when I moved out. My mom made this for me. It's got basically the formative parts of my years. It's got grandfather, father, and my mother. You know, child of the 70s. Check out that rockiness. That's awesome. It's got my sister in there. I've always been a gun guy. Check this out. Awesome shorts, huh? Got a fake Uzi in my hand, jumping on a trampoline in Arizona. Really good book. That one brought a tear to my eye when my mom gave that to me. Alright. I recommend a couple books, something like this for everybody. Just a few people have asked me. And that's basically a desk reference. That means a book. Something you can refer to. And this is a complete guide to symptoms, illnesses, and surgery. It's just a little something to help out, because when the power goes out, you may need something. You may not be able to use your phone, may have broke, may have ran out of batteries if it took long enough. A couple of days. Just really handy to have around the house. Can help you in deciding whether or not you want to go to the doctor or not, if you're kind of on the border about it. Another thing, self-care advisor for at-home health guide. It's got signs, symptoms, when to call the doctor, emergency and first aid, preventive strategies, just basic stuff. That's pretty good. And they're all things that just kind of help you. They're primers. It's not like this is the only way to do it. Did not buy this in Italy. I had a Book of the Month club for years ago. This is one of them. I don't use it a lot, but there are some good Southern Italian recipes in here. If you're unfamiliar with the way Italy is shaped and where it is, Southern Italy, well, almost all of it, but majority of Southern Italy, including Sicily, which is an island off the coast, the southern tip of Italy, which is still Italy, essentially, are all Mediterranean. And so it has a lot of Mediterranean influences, even more so than more of the northern parts of Italy, which have more French. Yeah. Worst case scenario. Who hasn't ever had this book? I'm sure there's a few people out there. It's cool. Shows you how to survive not just UFOs, but like fires. You're stuck in a high-rise building. How do you get out when there's a fire, a collapse, something like that? Nice little strategy. Pretty cool little book. Great bathroom reading. This guy, I love his books. Anthony Bourdain is an excellent author. You might know him from what are they? What's his new one? I keep thinking Idiot Abroad, but that's not it. Anyways, he does those travel shows where he goes over into foreign countries and he tries out different foods and meets interesting people. That's him. That's this guy right here. The Nasty Bits is a good book. This is one of like 4 or 5 books of his I own. And it's all the nasty bits of restaurant life, essentially. Really good. I highly recommend it if you like his style of writing, which his style of writing transfers over to people's thoughts very easily. I think the majority of people would really enjoy his writing. Right here, The Handbook of Knots. What former Navy guy would not have a complete shelf, or would have a complete shelf only with this? Full of different types of knots. I got my own examples in there doing different knots. Like here's a prusik knot. One before was a Spanish bowline. Essentially, it's a double bowline you can use as an emergency harness. Pretty cool. And I've actually used something like that. It was called something else when I learned it. But yeah, it was pretty sweet. And I actually used one, made it, and I was on the ship painting. And I got in trouble when they found out. Well, all our harnesses were out. On to something more serious. I'm a huge World War II, well, just basically a war history nut. And not because I'm some sick bastard. It's because the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the adverse conditions of all manner, and having to overcome them, and several times not overcoming them. I really like the stories, and it's sad that generation's dying off now, but at least we have some of their stories in written form, because written form takes a lot longer to disappear. Colder Than Hell. It's a Marine Rifle Company at Chosin Reservoir. Chosin Reservoir is in, that's right, Ron, in Korea. This is at the very beginning of the Korean conflict, as they call it. It's a Korean War, and believe it or not, folks, the Korean War is still going on to this day. This is back in the 50s, okay? To this day, it's still active. They've never declared a truce. It's not over. So, Colder Than Hell is when the Marines go in, they kick ass. And it's the Chinese and what wind up being the North Koreans. And then they get their asses handed to them and pushed back into the sea. Really good book. Excellent. And it means a lot to me because my grandfather, he was there. He's not in the book, but he was part of that insanity, amongst other areas that he was involved with. Some of you may know this book, and after I tell you what it is, if you don't know right now, you'll probably remember it. It's No Surrender, My 30-Year War by Hiro Onoda. This dude, hi, you like this book too? Thanks. Well, this guy, amazing story. If I remember correctly, it was in the Philippines. World War II happens, Japanese, they've invaded a lot of islands and they take them over just for resources and command and control, basically. America goes in, wipes them out, essentially. Well, this guy, he got stuck there on one of the islands by himself for 30 years until 1970, probably says on 1970 something. So we're going from 1940 something. God, I want to say it was the 70s. Alright, we'll just keep going. But for around 30 years, he was out there fighting his own personal battle. And he was still under the assumption that the Japanese are still going. He just got left behind for some reason. So he had no idea about Nagasaki and Hiroshima being bombed by atomic bombs. He had no idea of them surrendering. No clue about Germany falling. About the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, any of that. All this stuff is going on, and this guy's still out there fighting. And it took a lot to convince this guy that the war is over, and it had been over for a long time. Really interesting story. The reason why I really like that book is because it's perseverance, mental fortitude, and staying focused as focused as you could possibly be right there on an objective and not wavering from it. Really, really interesting. Of course, he comes to, well, I won't tell you anymore. The book's really good. I highly recommend it. Even if you're not a war buff. Really good survival story. The Pirate Hunter. I thought this was going to be a stupid book, honestly. But I was intrigued by it. So I was like, yeah, I'll go ahead and buy it. This is years ago. The True Story of Captain Kidd. It's a sad story. About corruption, politics, rich people, and the way they use other people. I'm not going to explain too much about it because I'll spoil the book. Really good book. Excellent book. I would highly recommend it. Once again, a lot of my books, even if you're not a history buff, you'll enjoy them. Flags of Our Fathers, excellent. A little bit of island hopping, but it's mostly about the Battle of Iwo Jima. That was made into a, was it TV series or a movie? I think it was just a movie. And then there's the other side of it where you have it from the Japanese side that was turned into a movie as well. It's a really good book, though. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Especially the whole debacle of raising the flag at Iwo Jima. This is what everyone knows it as. This is not the first American flag that was raised on top of Iwo Jima. It was a tiny little one. That's all I'll say about that, because it's a really good part of the book. It really makes it worth it. Just that one story out of the many stories in there makes that whole book worth it. On to other stuff. Actually, I'll show this one first. There's a reason behind me showing you this one first. Fyodor Dostoevsky. At least that's how I pronounce it. Dostoevsky. This was his first book that I ever read. And Crime and Punishment. There's arguments or discussions about whether or not it's a true story. I can easily see how it was a true story and he got it by his own personal experience, or that he just made the whole thing up. It's a really, really good book. I read it because everyone was talking about it in my circles at the time. This was back in, oh man, the 90s when I read this book, I think. But yeah. Everyone was talking about it. It was in the news a little bit for some reason. And I was like, yeah, I'll go ahead and pick it up. And I saw how big it was. I was like, crap, I hope it's good. I was reading it, and, the first chapter-ish, it was kind of slow. Not like Stephen King slow. So as I was saying there, first chapter, so it's a little slow. It drags on a little bit. And I just forced myself through it. And at the time, I was younger, I was in my 20s. Excellent book. This is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. After getting through the first chapter, you start getting really, really into this book to the point, at least for me, to where his descriptions were good enough for me to where I was visualizing every single little tiny detail. And I normally do that in books when I'm reading them. I try to put myself in that situation and try to imagine every little detail I can. And it really sears into my memory. But this book, something about it just clicked with me. And once I started getting into it, I could not put this book down. I read it super fast, and it was so good. And when I was done reading it, I was like, at the end, I was just like, holy shit. Really good book. I highly recommend this book. Now, why did I switch this book out for a different one real quick right now? This is why. This is the second book of his I read. The House of the Dead. This is his mostly true story about when he went to the House of the Dead, which was a prison in frickin' Siberia, a death prison basically. And it's a really good book, and it holds its weight perfectly even nowadays. Very good book. The House of the Dead by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Get that one. Got this one. Haven't read all of it, just little bits of it. Canterbury Tales. I got that one, of course, like a lot of other people did when Seven came out, that movie. Indian Givers, it's a good one. More history, kind of warish history. How the Indians of the Americas transformed the world. Really good. Let's see. Bill of Wrongs. After reading this book, I debated whether or not I should get rid of it because of evidence. I mean, seriously. This book was really, really good. If you want to scare yourself about our government, and this is an older book too. This isn't even the new crap the government's doing. If you want to scare yourself, get this book. You'll really consider a lot of stuff that's going on This was in 2007 when this one came out. Get that book. I do recommend you read it. Every American should read this book. It's a short book. It's a really quick read as well. Of course, got a little Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls. That's a pretty good one there, if I do say so myself. Angels and Demons. This is actually a friend's book that I can't get in touch with, and I've had it for a couple of years now. Out of the entire book, and I've watched the movie too, out of the whole book, my favorite part is the very beginning of it. I'll go ahead and tell you about it from what I remember. It deals with what's his name, who, whatever his actor's name is in here, or his character's name is. And he has to go to Italy. And he gets on board a scramjet. I just really like the description of it, and that was my favorite part of the whole book. Yes, there's tons of descriptions in here. Tons of research and creativity went into making this book. My favorite part is probably the simplest one out of the entire book. Just my thoughts on it. I would never read it again. I don't really recommend it to anyone. It's not that great. Ultimate Quick and Healthy Cookbook. I think I've cooked a couple recipes out of it. Nothing major. This, I won't show you, because it has the base of one of my favorite recipes in the world for sesame chicken. In fact, it's right there. So I'm not going to show you any of that. That's a Chinese cookbook. I used to have tons of Chinese cookbooks, but that's the only one that sort of survived, and the only one that I actually like any of the recipes out of. This one was attacked by a puppy many, many years ago, and I still keep it. If you cook any food at all, if you're interested in cooking, you have to get this cookbook. It's called The Joy of Cooking. The newer the edition, the better, or even if you get an old one from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, it doesn't matter. Excellent cookbook. This is a great way to start learning techniques so you don't have to rely on recipes as much. And that's what real cooks do. Is the recipes, it's important to a point, but what's more important is your technique. Here's a really crappy celebrity tattoos. It just shows a bunch of celebrities and their tattoos. Yeah, nothing really interesting about that. This is a pretty cool book right here, actually. I don't know how many times I've looked through this one. Camp's Unfamiliar. Quotations from 2000 BC to the present. And the present for this, we'll look for. It's a really good book, and it has the more lesser known great quotes throughout history. And it's great. If you're a student in school and you need some quotes to kind of get you started on stuff, this is really good for that. If you're looking for a wacky tattoo idea, that's why I got this at first. Didn't use it for that at all. It's good for that. It's a good conversation starter too, by the way. What do we got here? We got some more medical. The American Medical Association Handbook of First Aid and Emergency Care. That's just basic care. Let's see here. Feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm scared to read this book. No, seriously. I have not read this book yet, and I need to. I got this from my godmother because I grew up in a really shitty situation. And I think I'm just about mature enough to read this book. It's scary, though. Getting close. May read that today, actually. It's about dealing with, growing up in bad situations, how to move on from it. Heavy, heavy. The Living Dead. This is actually a really good book. I haven't read the whole thing yet. There's a couple stories I haven't read in it. It's a collection of stories by Clive Barker, Poppy Z. Don't know who that is, Neil Gaiman, Joe Hill, Laurel K. Hamilton, Stephen King, Kelly Link, George R. R. Martin, and many others. It's all about zombies and the living dead. There's some really good stories in here too. So if you're into that, or if you're into creative writing, you probably really like this book. I did. Here's another kind of self-help one. Codependent No More. How to Stop Controlling Others and Start Caring for Yourself. That goes along with that other one. This one's cool. Ron, I think you've already seen this one here. Family Treasury of Great Biographies. Nope, there's the other one. This has got Eleanor Roosevelt, Napoleon, Richard Wright, Beethoven, and Elizabeth Countess Russell. This has also lost its cover. Yeah, I lost the cover on this years and years and years and years ago. This is a book of poems, essentially. It is Jonathan Livingston Seagull. The only reason why I read this is because my grandfather used to have this book, and he used to wear, I forget for how many decades, I think since the 70s, a silver pendant on a silver chain that had just the seagull on the front, and if you flipped it over, it had the biggest saying out of this whole book, where you have the freedom to be yourself here and now. He never took it off until he died. And he told my grandma to give that pendant to me when she felt I was old enough. So I got that when I was 16 or 17. And I wore that for many, many years. I haven't worn it in a long time due to work. And I even wore it in the Navy when you weren't allowed to. And it never left me. Still have it, still love it. It means a lot to me. Shun catalog. From this year or last year, I forget. Shun knives. Great knives. You know what that is? Let's get a little closer. Some of you may know what this book is just by looking at that right there. Who is that? What book is this? It's an excellent book. It's Treasure Island. This is an old one too, if I remember correctly. Robert Louis Stevenson. Treasure Island is a great, great story. There have been many remake movies of it. There have been kind of oddball remake movies of it, like Treasure Planet, which is actually a good cartoon. But if you've never read Treasure Island, do yourself a favor and read Treasure Island. Even if you've seen, the 1950s, 1960s movie remake of it a million times, like me, do yourself a favor and read it. When did Josh get this one? Well, I wasn't alive back then, but this is a 1949 edition. Of course, it's lost its dust cover, but that's okay. And it's got that old smell to it. Treasure Island is an excellent, excellent book. Highly recommend it, especially if you're a kid. That's what it's mostly geared towards. It deals with some pretty cool issues of dealing with people as well in it. Treasure Island, folks. Oh, doggy, you have to get back. I'm moving now. Yeah, sniff the camera. That's always good. Back it up. There we go. We're almost to the end of the shelf, folks. Wild Animus. I still haven't finished reading this, so I don't know really what to tell you. Wild Animus. How far would you go to find yourself? In Richard Shapiro's provocative debut novel, a young man rejects a normal life to follow a wild inner calling. Sounds cool. We'll save that one for last. I got this not in Greece, but over in Italy. I forget where in Italy I bought that, actually. There's just another one of their open-air markets. A lot of the markets have books. And they have tables and tables and tables of nothing but books everywhere. It's really cool if you like books. But it's all about Greek mythology. And it shows the constellations, what they actually look like, and with overlays on them, and a little story of each one. My sister used this in school for an assignment, and even my daughter-in-law, she even used that in school to complete her Greek mythology assignment. And she had to do like a show and tell type thing and give her a demonstration, and she used that, which was cool. She got an A, and she told the story of where it came from. Sitting Ducks, cute cartoon. My wife really liked it, and I bought her this book. He got attacked by a dog, got ripped up a little bit. It's pretty cute. Kid stories. One of my favorite people in history, Nikola Tesla. Someone who thinks outside the box, isn't afraid about it. A lot of the inventions we take for granted today came from this guy. And he was screwed over a lot. This is just his lectures before the New York Academy of Science, April 6, 1897. People used to speak the lecture before. Doesn't mean the time before this lecture. It means in front of. You stand before these people and you give a lecture on stuff. So check it out. It's really good. I recommend, I mean, you could read all of it online. But books are nice to have because, sometimes you just don't want to look at a dang computer screen. The Natural Healing Cookbook. Basically, good cooking. How to keep yourself healthier just through cooking alone. It's a good book. I definitely recommend it, especially if you're not doing well health-wise. I got that just before I had back surgery to help heal myself, my wife. Yes, once again, you're just attacking that camera. You're jealous. You want all the attention for yourself. This is a really long video, so I apologize to some of you. But it's kind of nice if you're doing work, you could just play it in the background. Last book, folks. This is not my grandfather's. I bought this myself because my family had lost my grandfather's version of this book. I am not a Hermetic philosopher, but the Kybalion is Hermetic philosophy by the Three Initiates. Hermetic philosophy and this group of people have been around since ancient Egyptian times. It's a very short book. You really have to pay attention while you're reading it, and a lot of spots I had to reread as well. I read it a couple times. The only reason why I have it is because my grandfather was pretty heavy into this stuff. He was a Mason. I forget what degree Mason. He was way up there in the Masonry. And this was part of his life. And that's why I bought it. And that's why I read it. Just to have a little piece of him. If you can't tell, my grandfather played a huge role in my life. My natural grandfather. And I only knew him for a couple of short years. But I still think of him almost every day to this day. Well, that concludes what's on shelf 2. We got one more shelf. There's not as many books on it. It's going to be a short one. It's right up there. Here's a quick peek for you. I hope you enjoyed the video series so far. There'll only be one more. Do yourselves a favor. Go out and just find a book and read it. It may be good. It may suck. Or it may be really good. And it could possibly change your life. You don't know until you try. Have a good day.